Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Manifest. Great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously we kind of pick up with Ben in, Cuba, as he's kind of investigating, he's trying to find this particular boat, which I did like that the dude was like, oh yeah, it's actually kind of ironic. Like, the boat you're looking for is called Saint Antonio, and San Antonio is the saints of lost things, and the fact that you can't find them. Irony is not lost on him. I thought that was kind of interesting. But luckily he does find the boat, but it's like every time he finds a boat, him, Michaela, and Cal have like a very intense vision, which I also think is interesting because obviously the other 828 passengers that are in this episode, that being Zeke and Sanvi, aren't feeling it because obviously their connections to all of this have their connections have been severed to the calling. So obviously we learned that like Zeke hasn't had one since, but for Michaela, this is like she hasn't had an intense one like this in months. So it's like now they're closer than ever to the core of everything. And I guess being so close to the core just sends them in an overdrive, because it's so interesting that they're finding the tailfin that was discovered at the end of season 2. We have that at the same time, like the vision connects to a lady they end up finding out who's missing. Her name's Angelina. She is also a fellow 828er. So Ben, on his side of things, obviously he meets up with the people on the boat and pays them so that he could sit, because immediately they were like, huh, are you from Montero Airlines, like the airline that 828 comes from? And it's like, it's so interesting they immediately thought that, but I guess it's because like the airline would probably want to jump on that immediately, or they probably figured like, oh, the airline will want to pay us and keep quiet about it. For them, it's like, yeah, we'll get like paid it out the wazoo like for this type of thing. But Ben, comes across it, and it's like, obviously it blows everyone's mind, because it's like, we saw the plane land, and we landed with the plane in New York. We even saw it explode. What's going on here? The moment he touched it, he had another calling and then got blown back. Obviously, sadly, that kid was nearby recording it, and obviously later on the police get involved. But luckily, Vance is here backing him up, because this whole thing was just kind of an operation of like, all right, we're just going to try and wait and see how things kind of play out on that front. But at the same time, you have Michaela, who's on her honeymoon with Zeke in Costa Rica, but it turns out things are really interesting because, Costa Rica is actually where you're supposed to be, because that's actually where Angelina was kind of living with her parents at the time. So it's like, okay, go visit them. They're like, yeah, they thought Angelina was in New York. They were like, yeah, they just couldn't help her and stuff like that, which obviously Zeke's like, yeah, I get it. Like, my mom had my own troubles, but the way they were talking, I was like, oh, that's a little suspicious. It almost seemed like they knew about her circumstances to a certain extent, and later conversations made it even more suspicious. Like the moment they came back around, and it's like, so why wouldn't you tell us that Angelina was feeling? We talked to her friend who was like, she's feeling kind of like she's being followed. She's kind of scared. Like, why wouldn't you bring that up when we're talking about we're looking for her? Because especially because we found out she didn't go back to New York, that she's probably still here in Costa Rica. And it was that moment I got super suspicious of her family. I was like, right, they keep pushing the point that they're super religious. So they think of all the stuff that probably she's seeing and that she's going through. They probably looked at her as something demonic. And it was that moment I was like, she's locked. That's where she is. She's locked up. Which I was like, damn, her own parents have her locked up, which ends up being the case. But I'm not too surprised. Once again, this show does that interesting thing of like, that the reception to people who are 828, or some people look at them and say, oh my God, they're a miracle. Other people, as we saw last season, heavily look at them as like, there's something wrong. These are terrible people. Like, they look at them as something else, which, maybe there's more to that. But it's kind of sad because Angelina was about to kill herself, just because at the very least she's been locked up there for months. Probably her parents thinking, like, in their own twisted mind, thinking they're doing something right, because we've seen that come up before too, of like, this person isn't our daughter, because the whole thing is like, when she came back, she wasn't the same, because I think for them, maybe she wasn't as religious as maybe she was before. I mean, but we never know. Like, we don't know like whether this strictness came about mainly because they were super religious before, and so was she, but now she came back different, so they're thinking she's demonic or she's possessed. She's hearing voices, she's seeing things. It's like, I think it's so interesting because obviously Michaela tries to bridge the gap by being like, I understand, my mom was super religious too, but I think Michaela's mom would have not had the reaction that like Angelina's parents did. I think that in itself speaks volume. At least from what we saw of her, I think she would have been a little bit more understanding. She probably would have come at it from the perspective of, yeah, this is a message from God. Like, God has anointed you guys. You guys are meant to, like, do something great, you know? Like, I think that in itself just kind of shows you, like, the difference. But what I thought was a really interesting thing was that Zeke knew at one point in time he starts fainting, and he did. I was like, "Whoa! Did something kick in at that moment?" I was like, "Are you?" And it's like, "No, he's faking it for Michaela." But even Michaela's like, "How'd you know I needed assistance?" And he was like, "I don't know. I just felt it." So either maybe like the link isn't completely severed. Maybe because there is that deep connection between him and Michaela that maybe he still gets a little surge. Maybe Sanvi's the only one who's completely... I mean, granted, she went about it the most, like... She more so, like, rather than kind of a scalpel, she kind of chainsawed the connection. So I think that might be a difference of, like, if the connection is... Like, it's like, I guess Zeke made a great sacrifice, and maybe it was a situation of, like, yep, you've done what you needed to do. This, like, maybe every member of 828 has, like, that ultimate thing they're supposed to lead to, or maybe just Zeke doing what he's doing, like, in that moment. Who knows? Like, or maybe it could be a thing of once you've reached your death date, if you've done enough good, or maybe the scale will balance out. If you do more good than bad, then maybe things kind of work out in your favor. Maybe, I don't know, or it could simply because, hey, he made a great sacrifice, and maybe that's what's still a lot of unclear on that front. So I think that's kind of interesting. Obviously, while this is all going down, like, you know, they've lost contact with Ben, so, like, Grace and Olive and Cal are all kind of worried, you know. But I also appreciate them all, the Stone family being the well-oiled machine that they are, because it's like, all right, what does she look like? She was about this, is she older, younger, older, old, this color hair, and it's like medium, it's like, you know, and it's like they're looking through the file, and it's like, Angelina, it's like, Kyle, you said she was old. Well, she is to me, and I'm like, oh, everyone's old to you, dude. I love that. It's like, oh, this woman who was born in 1990, oh, she's so old, right? That's so messed up. But nevertheless, I just thought that was so, like I said, just like them being a well-oiled machine, like they're all on the same page, you know. Olive's looking after her baby sibling and everything, and even Grace being like, oh, look, you're so natural at it. It's like, after everything you've been through recently, for you to kind of be okay. And it's like, you know, she's thanking her mom, because it's like, obviously we saw last season, and not just last season, even in season 1, Olive was going through a rough patch, but I think it's good. Like I said, everything's on the Stone family front. It's like, we're in this together, like we're here for each other. Like I said, a well-oiled machine, interestingly enough. But nevertheless, circling back to Ben's situation, luckily Vance was able to kind of interfere the moment the police got involved, because the moment Ben touched it again, nothing happened, which I'm like, I guess you got what was necessary. I guess what was needed the first time through, so it's like, okay, we don't need to hit you with the second time. It's like, you only get one. Which is interesting how that happens, because like you can have the same calling over and over again, kind of getting a little bit more each time, but it's just in that moment, it's just, I guess it's just kind of like he wasn't supposed to do that, so I guess that's why it's like, no, that was kind of his warning, and it's like, all right, you got your warning, that's a bit, it's just interesting how it didn't trigger again, but I guess it's like, usually it takes other things happening for the callings to kind of trigger. They are kind of like a one-time, like, oh, you got triggered here, something else going to trigger you later on down the road, so it's never like a consistent thing of triggering the calling, so maybe that's kind of what it is. But it was an interesting conversation about, like, okay, like, you know, Ben and Vance are bouncing off ideas, and for Vance, it's like, for him, in his line of work, it's all about facts. Like, you know, to him, that's all there is in this world, just the facts, and it's like, that got turned upside down the moment the passengers in the plane came back, and it's like, but the fact of the matter, and that kind of has to be stated as a fact, but still, it's like, beyond that, we don't know what the situation is, but he feels like they're a step closer to kind of figuring out this mystery, which Ben's like, I'm glad to have you on our side, Vance. But since Vance sacrificing himself to, like, hey, he hands himself over to the to whatever, like, cops or government officials ended up arresting him just so that Ben and his other guy could get away, which, you know, sadly for obviously I've avoided watching too much promotional material, but there's hints to Vance's situation in the trailer. I won't spoil it if you're someone who avoided the trailers and stuff like that. I try to avoid them, but I've seen some of the promotional material, so I know, potentially, don't know the outcome, but we kind of know where Vance is going to end up. Well, we do know the outcome, just not how we get there. So I don't want to talk about it in any shape or form, but it's going to be interesting to see how Vance's situation is going to play out, especially because he told Ben, don't help me. That begs the question, is the Calling's going to lead Ben and them back to Vance or not? Or is his circumstances going to get dealt with in a different manner? I'm curious to ultimately see on that front. But obviously they happen to be within a relative area, so Ben and them were able to kind of just come pick up Michaela, Zeke, Angelina. Obviously Cal had already been like, yeah, we need to set up my room. My dad's going to be bringing someone here to stay, which is like, because Grace and Oliver, like, dude, it's always like one shoe. You think at this point, we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop that we'd run out of shoes. And it's like, oh, and there goes another shoe, you know? So it is just one thing after another. There was this interesting conversation between Sanvi and Grace where it's like, she was even saying to Grace, like, hey, you don't have to come all the way out here. You could it'd probably be better for you just to find a doctor that's closer. You don't have to, but it's like, no, you saved our son's life, so we're always going to be indebted to you. Plus, you understand what Kyle's going through inside and out, because they'd have to explain the circumstances. It helps to have someone like Sanvi on their side, because it's like, you're a friend to the family, you're an ally, so like, we trust you. But I think it's also like Sanvi's in that place of like, because she's so disconnected from everything now that I'm sure that kind of plays a role in like her kind of probably feeling a little bad, but also like, well, the whole general thing, which I honestly completely forgot about that until the recap at the beginning. I was like, oh right, you killed the general. I forgot about that. Wow, how did I forget that? Like, I completely forgot that. I was like, wow. So that was interesting. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Which I love how that story comes back, because obviously like Drea like gets visited by someone that's like looking for their mom, and I was like, she's asking for Michaela specifically. I'm like, what's up with that? I was like, is she a passenger? Is her mom a passenger? Like, what's up with that? And Jarrett's kind of interested, being like, all right, what's that information about? Which obviously there is a thing of like, right, there's still kind of the awkwardness of like, because Drea was like, you could have told them about this information about Angelina. It's like, yeah, but it's faster this way. She's like, it's okay to still feel a certain way because your ex is on her honeymoon. He's like, no, it's all good. But I'm like, oh, that's why I was kind of wondering, like, if they'll potentially set up like a Jared and Drea thing. Maybe not. That might not. Which, I mean, that might even be more awkward, because it's like, right, because Drea's her new partner, and it's like, oh, I'm not only. Would that be weird, dating her ex-partner in more ways than one, not just a boyfriend and girlfriend thing, I mean, not just a boyfriend and almost borderline fiance thing, but also the thing of, hey, you were actual literal partners too, so I'm sure that would complicate things as much on that front as well. But it is interesting at the end, is like, she's like, yeah, my mom's going missing, and she's like, yeah, she has a government job. I was like, oh no, and yep, her mom's the general, because she knows what her mom is involved in. Do correct me in the comments down below. I don't think we ever saw what happened to the general, did we? Because I don't think Sanvi told anyone. Like, I think she's kept that to herself. So because I'm trying to wonder if like Vance and them like swooped in and covered that up. Because if you do remember, let me know in the comments down below. I guess I could just go back and rewatch the season 2 finale. At least for now, it's still on Hulu. So I mean, like, I think it's like the last 4 or 5 episodes of like season 2 are still up there for now. I'm sure they're going to disappear soon enough as this season progresses, but. Yeah, I'm trying to. I don't remember. Like, I think Sanvi, like, it just happened, and then she just left her. So I'm sure there's probably some evidence connecting that. But it's like, oh, things are kind of. That's interesting. Like, yeah, Sanvi killed her mom, and it's like, yeah, I mean, not like Sanvi meant to, but it is a situation of like, right, the general was doing all that shady stuff, but it's still like, yeah, that's going to be something. I mean, it's still haunting her already, because she's listening to the recordings over and over again, because I think for her, it's her way of punishing herself, like a constant reminder of like, this is what you did. You killed someone. Regardless of the circumstances, you still murdered someone. She's a scientist, she's a doctor, so it's like, do no harm. I'm sure that reigns. I mean, just who she is as a person. She's a good-natured person, so I think it just hits her on multiple fronts of like, I'm doing this is wrong, and obviously it's a big, deep, dark secret, so I think that plays a role in everything. But also, it's going to be interesting when this eventually ties back, because I don't know if Jarrett is aware of the general's identity. I know Ben, Vance, and Sanvi know. I don't know who else amongst the 828ers or even like everyone. I don't know who else knows about her. I don't know if Michaela knows what she looks like or Zeke does, but eventually that's going to circle back to Sanvi and finding out. It's going to be like, oh man, this is going to be awkward. This is going to be weird. Interesting enough, Vance isn't in the picture right now, so that's definitely going to be something Sanvi's going to have to handle on her own. Because once again, I don't think he knows about her. I'm fairly certain she's the only one that knows she killed the general. Because we never, I mean, not unless her body, like, she might be labeled as kind of a Jane Doe, so she might be somewhere in like the morgue backlog because she's been missing for the past 3 months. Because apparently it's been 3 months since season 2's finale. So I'm curious if she just kind of like still kind of a Jane Doe, because she probably didn't have any identification on her. Once again, I don't know if government officials have like their like fingerprints in like the system or something like that, or maybe like the morgue just never got to her body, or it could be that someone snatched up her body, like whatever group she was working with, which could be that in itself could potentially tie into the other aspect of our story. We'll quickly get to it, but Ben kind of comes to a realization about the plane, and it kind of coincides with my thought. If you never heard my season 2 finale review, my theory was initially that they were copies, that the plane, all the passengers originally died. Now it seems like me and Ben are on the same page on that front. But my thought was that they were copied. His thing is that they were resurrected. And I was like, resurrecting actually fits more perfectly with everything that's going down. Because everything has been like a resurrection of sorts. So it never crossed my mind. I just assumed that they were like copies. So that's why when I was like, when people were kind of like, oh, don't look at them as something other than human, that this isn't the person I knew. That I was like, technically they are true, because that person, the real version of them, died, and they were like, but still, I guess maybe on some level it could still be the case, considering like, hey, well, because it begs the question, because it's like, right, this part of the plane was found in the water, but then what about the plane that landed in New York? Like, obviously Ben said like it blew up, it died, so it begs the question, like, maybe when the 828ers die, they like their resurrection, like maybe they are kind of copies to a certain extent, or at the very least, so maybe when this version of them dies, they go back to where they were supposed to be. So where the plane would have originally exploded and crashed, like maybe like everyone that was ever resurrected, any of the 828ers that have subsequently died, like maybe they're there, like the captain, the pilot, as well as the lady he took into the storm, that the plane got exploded, like he was trying to like, it's like, oh, she knows more than she's letting on, and he killed himself. And remember that whole situation back in, that was season 1. So maybe their bodies are somewhere in the bottom of that water now too, because it's like, oh, there are 828ers that died, so their resurrection is undone and they're back to where they were supposed to be. So maybe that also explains like why, like when they're near their death date, they're dying the way that they were initially supposed to die, because it's basically the full circle of everything kind of catching up to them. I know it's like I'm not explaining it the best way, but I'm that's where it is in my head. Like, I think like when they all died, they eventually are going to go back to wherever the rest of that plane fell, because I think when the plane exploded, it popped into existence where it originally was. Not less, it is still kind of what I thought of, like, yes, they were resurrected by being made copies. So, but also that begs the question, then why, like, because at first you're thinking like the plane exploded because someone's trying to cover something up, but it's like, no, the plane exploded because I guess like it served its purpose. So maybe like its time frame of returning, its death date was that day, so that's why it exploded. As Ben said, it died, and so it kind of went, just like Zeke was supposed to die of frostbite because that's how he initially died. So obviously that's how the plane initially died, was exploding. So it kind of reached its death day, and once again, kind of maybe it was teleported to where it originally died. From the fragments from when it actually exploded. Like I said, I don't know whether it's just a full-blown magical resurrection and you're going to where you're supposed to be, or is it a situation that they are in fact copies? The plane is, the passengers. What's interesting too is like, even Michaela's like, you were never the one that believed in God and everything like that. He's like, yeah, but considering everything going on, what we know now, maybe it's time to start believing. You know, maybe that explains the callings and everything. So, obviously for Cal, and the moment the resurrection thing came up, it was like, right, remember, we never found those 3 bodies at the end of season 2. They even brought that up in the recap. So it's like resurrection. That's why I think resurrection is probably the more appropriate term. Not even like copying, but I still feel like 2 could coexist. But for now, we'll lean just more towards a resurrection rather than my thought of like it being them being copied. Like I said, I think both could kind of coexist, but we'll have to wait and see in that regard. But I was like, now it makes sense why they couldn't find the bodies, because either the bodies kind of like they got I'm curious about like. What our stinger at the end of the episode is them waking up, because for Cal it's like he's not having the nightmares anymore, but he's still getting that same sensation. So, but they've been resurrected, and so that's definitely interesting. We saw that kind of at the end, so it's like the question is like, was that sometime after the season 2 finale, like when their bodies couldn't be found, their bodies drifted somewhere else because they had actually got resurrected and brought, or did they only just now get brought back 3 months later? Well, because it also, remember the time frame is like you're only as alive for as long as you've been gone, so they've been going for 3 months potentially. So that means they have a lifespan of about 3 months. They have 3 months to kind of do whatever they're going to do. So is this the calling? Is this actually like, is there a flip side to the calling? Is there some like evil that's connected to all of this that's like doing its own thing? Like maybe that's why the calling wanted her to let them go, because Michaela to let them go last season, because it didn't want this situation to be an outcome, that you don't want terrible human beings to come back with this power, you know. Maybe something else gets added to them, that maybe like the passengers, like the 828ers, maybe these 3 have some access to some level of this power that maybe the 828ers haven't tapped into yet. Maybe not. I don't know. There's still a lot to this mystery still unfold. We've still got an entire season to kind of unfold everything, but what role Angelina's going to play in it, I think it's kind of befitting, because obviously TJ's not like around right now, so I think that kind of fits, kind of having someone almost kind of fill that void. But I'm sure like she has her own part to play in it. Like Kyle's like, yeah, I've been waiting for you. So it's like maybe they're kind of connected. Like maybe, well, at the very least, like maybe she's the next piece in the puzzle to kind of, you know, once again, Cal is kind of at the center of this web that is the 828 mystery. So it kind of all sprouts from him, because he's the one that's the most connected on a level like no others, which is interesting, because it feels like Ben even said it himself that he felt like his vision went on longer than Cal and Michaela, so he saw a little more. But it might just be because he touched the tailfin, so it supercharged his vision where everyone else didn't. But it's interesting, because Cal is usually the one who knows the most. So I still feel like that, but I think in this instant, Ben was able to kind of jump a couple steps ahead. So regardless, obviously, this is just some of the stuff going through my mind. I'm really excited to see where everything ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.